là xuống dưới từ trên là thì những program thì yêu in yêu này sẽ program thì phải chọc thì có gì mà luyện bao con cho về si shi again. This is the long life prayer of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So today đúng đó. So Gomang Monastery, which is part of the Drepung monastic university, has newly built this debating courtyard. So I've come here to inaugurate this debate courtyard. So we have many monks and monastics, and there are many people from Mongolian, of Mongolian race, and then other people, foreigners. And we have the people from Emory University. So we have many scholars, experts, who have had very strong bond with us. So I'd like to first greet everyone and say Tashidelek to everyone. So regarding science, in the past, our abbots and lamas considered it rather distant, left it rather distant from us. And some of my friends have even told me that science is killer of religion, so they have even warned me. But the reality is that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which belongs to the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, and then of course the Pali tradition of Buddhism, regarding that, the Buddha taught the three Pitakas, the three collections of teachings, so that the Pali tradition becomes the foundation of Buddhism. And then the Sanskrit, which was the scholarly language in the past. What happened? So the educational disciplines were actually preserved in Sanskrit language. So Buddha taught the Sanskrit tradition in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. He taught in Sanskrit, and then gradually the glorious Nalanda monastic institution, mainly focusing on the Sanskrit tradition, spread there, or flourished there. And Nalanda used to have all the different disciplines that were extant in India in those ancient times. Of course, science as such, modern science has not spread yet in Nalanda. But we know that the Master Nagarjuna was said to have used a gold elixir, which is like alchemy. And therefore, I thought that we should study modern science in our monastic institutions. So science also developed in the West gradually. In other words, a knowledge which deals with external material things developed in the West. In our text, we talk about the manifest objects, the obvious objects, and then slightly hidden, and those of this extremely hidden phenomena. And so the slightly hidden phenomena must be inferred through logic, and that for that also we have to have the experience, empirical experience. that is to say, to know, we have to know, have the experience of the obvious objects. So if you study science, it helps in understanding and learning about the obvious things. So science seems to have focused mainly, primarily on external matter only. And therefore, in science, the research subjects or objects for research should not only be confined to material things alone, but it should also include subjective mind as well. And so we have had talks about this, so that the materially oriented science and the mentally oriented science of mind in Buddhism, if we could combine these two, it would be also beneficial to modern science. For example, in quantum physics, what they explain is quite incredible. What we say in Buddhist tradition, saying that the things do not things do not exist the way they appear to us, is explained in science. For example, one Indian scientist, Raja Ramana, nuclear scientist, has about 20 years ago told me that quantum physics is something new in the West. It's a new subject, discipline in the West. But in India, the concept of quantum physics was already discovered 2000 or more than 2,500 years ago, and he even recited certain verses from Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyama Kakarika, fundamental treatise of the middle way. And so, what is said in this is, in the Buddhist tradition, is that things are dependently designated. So, in the modern subjects like science and so forth, we should also introduce a study of mind and emotions and psychology from our tradition. So, on our part, those of you who have experience of our own tradition, not only just intellectual understanding, but knowledge, but developing some kind of experience of the teaching within ourselves, it would be good for us also to learn science. So, in Nalanda tradition, all the different philosophical traditions that existed in India were studied. So at this time now, the world is, the science has advanced so much in the world, and therefore, if we could combine both the traditional study and the modern science, so that we could have a complete, holistic education in our own tradition as well, and therefore paying attention and taking interest in science. And then many years ago, I have talked about the categorizing the whole of the content, subject matter of the Kanjur and Tengyur, the words translated into Tibetan, words of the Buddha translated into Tibetan, and their exegetical treatises into three categories, which are the science as found in Buddhist literature, and then interdependent nature of things, which pertains to philosophy, and then the religion. And so, and then after I mentioned about these, then there was some meeting of the monastic scholars who worked on compiling books on science, science as found in Indian classics, and Buddhist and philosophy. and religion. So, although, with regard to the third category, religion, it has only to do with the Buddhists, whereas science and philosophy are something which could be used as intellectual, academic subject. So they could be just considered as part of a knowledge and not without touching any religion as such. So we have brought out a book of classical philosophy and science in Buddhist classics. And so these are being translated into, the 2 volumes were complete, on science were published. And then we also have an abbreviated volume on science. And so these are being translated into other languages like science, English, and so forth. So over 3,000 years, India has had this tradition of ahimsa, non-violence, which is not only about, restraining harming others. So the philosophy of non-violence and also the philosophy of compassion have been practiced in India for over 3,000 years. So this land of the noble beings, as India is called, so there has also been the practice of single-pointed concentration called calm abiding, and also penetrative insight. So the modern science, of course, and the traditional ancient Indian knowledge can be combined. India has the potential to do that. So modern science helps in physical comfort, external developments and so forth, and the modern, traditional Indian knowledge helps to keep the calmness of mind. And so then I also talk about the harmony amongst the different religious traditions. Look at the world today. Even people are killing one another, even in the name of religion. And lots of problems that we face today are the product or the result of our human actions. So science focuses more on the sensorial experience, and they don't talk much about the mind or consciousness as such, the mental consciousness. Until the end of the 20th century, they have been doing like that. But towards the end of the 20th century, some scientists have found that there is a third factor, a different or separate factor which affects or impacts our brain as well. And so today, since towards the end of the 20th century, there have been scientists and experts who even accept something, consciousness as being something separate or different from the brain. So of course there are religious traditions like Christianity, Judaism, Islam and so forth in the West, which are focused on God as the creator, and so they pray to God for blessings and so forth. Whereas in Buddhism, the Buddha himself has said that I have shown you the path to liberation, nirvana, whereas liberation itself is in your hands. Know that the Buddha said, know that this liberation is in your hands. So we don't just seek blessings of the Buddha as such, but we go through the process of study, learning the different sciences, different subjects, and then reflect on whatever we have studied. And then through the reflection we gain conviction, and then that point that we have felt convinced about is integrated in our meditation, so that we are able to make transformation within ourselves. And so ancient Indian knowledge, ancient Indian sciences are something that I've been saying are relevant to the contemporary world. So we should not keep this knowledge only to ourselves, but not only praying, but we should practically act in serving the world from our tradition. So the Buddha gave teachings to his disciples by knowing their temperaments, their inclination and interest. So according to the different mental dispositions of the disciples, the Buddha gave his teaching. And so in today's world, in the educational system, what is lacking is the teaching of inner values like compassion, moral ethics. So when we have discussions with scientists, we get new knowledge. This is possible, certainly, of all the different religious traditions in the world. The one which can have discussions and dialogues with scientists, sitting together with them, side by side, is the Nalanda tradition, or the Sanskrit Buddhist tradition. I have had some discussions some years ago with some PhD candidates and also their professors, and some of them were monks, and then there were many lay people as well. We met in Delhi, and so we discussed about the Four Noble Truths, the 16 characteristics, and the 37 aids, or 37 practices aligning with enlightenment. And so during our discussion, I asked them this question: do you resort only to scriptural authority or citations to explain these points, the Four Noble Truths and the 16 characteristics? And they said, scripture. So I reflected on Dignaga and Dhammakirti's texts on logic, where they actually make or prove the Four Noble Truths and their 16 aspects through reason and logic. In, for example, the Pramana Karika by Dharmakirti, where it says, therefore, from the understanding of impermanence, one understands the samsara to be in the nature of suffering, and from there, this gives you the impetus or the insight into the no-self, view of no-self. So this is how the Buddha has given teaching. And so Nalanda tradition, or the Sanskrit tradition, emphasizes logic and reason to explain and verify the teaching of the Buddha. So there may be a few tens of millions of Buddhists. But amongst them, the ones who are using logic to understand the two truths, the conventional and ultimate truth, and on the basis of which to draw the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, as Abhisamaya Alankara says, the nature of the the practices are in terms of the two truths, and on understanding the two truths, the Four Noble Truths are explained and understood. So in this tradition, what actually is said is that things appear to us as if they have some kind of absolute existence, and this is ignorance. It's a distorted or misconceived view, and therefore this does not have any support of true knowledge. So when we prove that things have no essential independent existence, this is proved through reason. So therefore it becomes a reality or truth. And therefore, it is possible, due to understanding that things have no true, independent, absolute existence, which is how we perceive and conceive things to be, it is understood that there is the possibility to overcome the ignorance, the fundamental ignorance, which is this misconception of reality. And therefore, we are able to confirm the truth of the teachings through this kind of logic, and therefore, because we use logic, there is this possibility for us to sit side by side with the scientists and have dialogues with them. So the mutual learning from each other's tradition, the scientists and us Buddhists, has been going on. And so with regard to psychology or the study of mind and emotions, this modern science is not yet deep enough, doesn't have that kind of profound or deep knowledge. Of course, in quantum physics, they do say that things do not exist the way they appear to us, that they do not have any objective existence. Whereas in our tradition, we talk about valid cognition or correct knowledge about things. As long as there is a correct knowledge about things, we can talk about their existence. So Chittamatras, the mind only school, what they explain and what quantum physics explain are quite similar. So in quantum physics, what they say is that as long as there's an observer, there is an observed object. But regarding the observer, the subjective mind, and the subjective person, the modern quantum physics has not yet done any research on that yet, or investigated into the observer as such. So in our text, it is said that first we cling to our oneself, and then with that clinging, we think about mine, this and that being mine, and so forth. And then the rest of the destructive emotions arise, such as attachment, anger, and so forth. So, though things are said to have no independent, absolute existence, whatever, yet they do exist, is what Buddhism says. And in its the highest philosophical view, and it is said that things exist by way of, merely by way of convention. So because we have this strong clinging to some kind of absolute existence in things, as if something is concrete, they are concretely existing, and when we say things are merely imputed and merely designated, it feels uncomfortable. But if you pursue in this meditation, understanding and gaining this insight into how things are merely designated, you'll be able to actually soften this grip at some absolute existence of things. So because of this, then we are able to, we will be able to soften our grip, and then the attachment and anger also will be reduced. So as Mullah Madhyamaka Karika says, due to our what is known as the inappropriate mentation or some kind of exaggerated outlook, we have all these negative emotions like anger, hatred, and so forth. And these inappropriate mentation or the exaggerated outlook are rooted in this the misconception of some kind of a called absolute existence in things. And therefore, once you understand things have no independent existence, the strong grasping also is reduced, and that in turn helps in reducing the attachment, hatred, and so forth. And even quantum physics says that the things do not exist the way they appear, and that helps to reduce the grip on some kind of absolute existence. And so in our tradition, on the basis of understanding the two truths, we draw the understanding and insight into the Four Noble Truths, on the basis of understanding which we base our practice of taking refuge in the three jewels. So these are all done based on reason. So I will read the text on the prayer to the 17 great panditas of the glorious Nalanda, illuminating the three faiths. To you, who perfectly born of compassionate wish to benefit beings, attained the ultimate protection of riddance and realization, God of gods, who guides all beings with his teaching on dependent arising, mighty sage, son among all exponents of truth, to you I prostrate. That is the salutation to the Buddha. And then the next is salutation to Buddha Master Nagarjuna. He was known as the second Buddha. To you who excelled in clarifying with a profound method of reasoning based on dependent arising the meaning of suchness, free of all extremes, wisdom of mother of all the conquerors, Prajnaparamita Sutras, founding as prophesied by the Buddha, the great vehicle tradition of the middle way, Nagarjuna, at your feet I pray. So Master Nagarjuna was a great being. And then next is Aryadeva, who was also an incredible master. To you, his main disciple, supremely learned and accomplished, who crossed the ocean of philosophies, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, glorious crown jewel of all who uphold the treatises of Nagarjuna. And then next is Buddha Palita. Buddha Palita was also a great master who clarified the Master Nagarjuna's position of using prasanga logic. And he has said in his commentary, Buddha Palita commentary on Mullah Madhyamaka Karika, if things were to have any essential in existence in and of themselves, what is the need for dependent arising? And what is the need for designation through dependence? And so when you understand this, that this grip or grasping at some kind of a concrete existence is dumbfounded, or as the ultimate meaning of dependent arising, the Arya's wisdom intention, you who elucidated the profound point that existence is mere imputation and name, and reached the level of supreme accomplishment, Buddha Palita, at your feet I pray. And next is Buddha, Master Bhaviveka. He had a quite sharp tongue, and he, in his commentary to Mullah Madhyamaka Karika, in his commentary on his own writing, he calls masters like Asanga and Vasubandhu to be shameless, to have strayed from the path or the philosophical assertion taught by Master Nagarjuna, who was prophesied by the Buddha himself. perfect Pandita who led to the philosophical tradition that refused extremes such as arising of truly existing substantial entities while accepting valid cognition and consensus perception of external world. To you, Arya Acharya Bhaviveka, I pray. And next is a prayer to Master Chandrakirti. Through the conditioning of dependent arising and conditionality of dependent arising and this being all there is, the appearance and emptiness of middle way tradition refutes the two extremes. As Master Tsongkhapa himself has said that understanding dependent origination of things will help in overcoming the extreme views of nihilism and eternalism. So when we talk about causality, the realists say that because things have causes and conditions, therefore things have some objective existence. And that's very reason they use to prove things having some kind of objective, independent, absolute existence is used by the Madhyamakas to prove that there is no such existence, that things have no essential, independent existence. Through the conditioning, a middle way tradition refutes the two extremes. To you who, skilled in expounding its depth and vastness, propagated the entire path of the Sutras and Tantras, Chandrakirti, to you I pray. So this is the verse in praise of Master Chandrakirti. So he was an incredible master. So this verse, which is found in Madhyamaka Avatara, is very helpful for me, very touching. Skilled in teaching the extraordinary, wondrous path of great compassion, with all the many reasoned arguments of the deep and vast tradition, to the host of fortunate disciples to be trained, to you, Bodhisattva Shantideva, I pray. So this is Master Bodhisattva Shantideva. His guide to the Bodhisattva way of life is also marvelous teaching. I received the teaching and explanation of this text from the Kinori master, Kono Lama Tenzin Gyatsen Rinpoche, so who told me that since Shantideva wrote this text for altruism, equaling and exchanging self and others, there has not been any greater text for that practice of altruism than this. So when we think about the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara by Shantideva, we should not just think that it's a text for prayer, for dedication prayers, but we should understand that the 6th chapter teaches the practice of patience or tolerance. It has used arguments against anger to so much so that anger is dumbfounded through these arguments. And in the 8th chapter, it deals with that of altruism, the cultivation of bodhicitta, as the altruistic spirit of enlightenment, which is cultivated on the basis of equaling and exchanging self and others. And there are lots of reasonings, arguments against cherishing oneself alone. And this self-cherishing attitude also is made dumbfounded through these reasonings. Skilled in the teaching of extraordinary, wondrous path of a great compassion, with all the many reasoned arguments of the deep and vast tradition, to the host of future fortunate disciples to be trained, to you, Bodhisattva Shantideva, I pray. And next, Chandrakshita. You who skilled in leading disciples to the emptiness of duality on the path of middle way, in accordance with the temperament, by introducing arguments from both middle way and logic, spread the Buddha's teaching in the land of snows. To you, great Abbot Chandrakshita, I pray. So he was invited by the Tibetan Emperor Trisong Detsen in the 8th century. So of course, Trisong Detsen already had some family connection with the Chinese emperor in those days. And at the advice of this Abbot Chandrakshita, the Samye Monastery was founded. And there were 4 different departments within the monastic compound. One of them is this the department of celibacy, the monks, and then there was also a department of translation. And so Trisong Detsen, when he came to think about taking Buddhism to Tibet, he actually decided to thought of taking it directly from India, and therefore he invited Master Chandrakshita from the Nalanda monastic institution, the topmost scholar of the Nalanda University at that time. And so when he came to Tibet, after he came to Tibet, he said to the Tibetan king that you have your own language, your own script writing, and therefore you don't need to study Buddhism through Sanskrit or Pali or another language, but you should translate the texts into Tibetan from Sanskrit or Pali and Pali into Tibetan. And therefore this advice was followed, and some scholars even say that the Chandrakshita himself took interest in learning Tibetan. So we have today over 300 volumes of the translated works from Indian languages. So without having to resort to Sanskrit or Pali, so Master Chandrakshita told us to study Buddhism in Tibetan, and therefore we should be very grateful to him. So we have the Kanjur and Tenjur, the translated words of the Buddha, and the exegetical treatises by Indian masters. All the major literature, Buddhist literature, are contained in these collections of the Kanjur and Tenjur. And next is Kamala Shilla. Having explained how to meditate in stages, according to the sutras and tantras, on the middle way view, free from extremes, and on combining sustained calm and profound insight, you who unerringly clarified the teaching of the conquerors in the land of snows, Kamalashila, at your feet, I pray. So Kamalashila was invited in accordance with the prophecy by Master Chandrakshita, his master, who said that in the future there will be some kind of a discord between the Chinese Buddhist practitioners and us, Tibetans, and at that time Kamalashila should be invited, and so accordingly he was invited. And next is Master Asanga. The 5 treatises of Maitreya are very precious teachings. So Abhisamaya Alamkara, the clear ornament of clear realization, actually explicates the implicit teaching of the hidden teaching of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So taken into Maitreya's care, skillful in spreading all the divisions of the greater vehicles teaching, you who taught the path of vast activity and introduced the tradition of the Vijnanavada school as prophesied by the conqueror, Asanga, at your feet I pray. And next is Vasubandhu, you who have held the 7 treatises of Abhidharma and non-dual emptiness. non-duality, and clarified the philosophical views of Sautrantika, Vaibhashika, Vijnanavada. The supreme scholar renowned as the second omniscient one, Acharya Vasubandhu, at your feet I pray. So he was an immensely great and learned scholar, opening 100 doors of valid cognition in order to teach the way of the Buddha scriptures through inherently evident reasoning. Logician who provides us with the eye of the investigating mind, Dignaga, at your feet I pray. So he also was an incredible master of logic. You who reflected thoroughly on all the vital points of Buddhist and non-Buddhist reasoning, and with the logical method of Sautrantika and Chittamatra, the deep and vast paths, bring certitude as you skillfully expound the marvels of Dharma tradition. Dharmakirti, at your feet I pray. And so there are these great treatises of logic written by Dharmakirti, such as the 7 treatises, the 3 of which are called the the body-like, main body-like teachings, and then 4 are derivatives of these. His Holiness also was reciting the verse from Master Tsongkhapa's educational biography of which is called The Destiny Fulfilled, regarding the tradition of logic. Illuminating the meaning of the Prajaparamita received from a Sangha and his brother in accordance with the middle way system, free from the extremes of existence and non-existence. You who lit a lamp to clarify the meaning of Abhisamaya Alamkara treatise, Arya Mukti Sena, at your feet I pray. So we do study the text, Abhisamaya Alamkara, based on Haribhadra's commentary, which is Haribhadra's commentary called Sphuta Earth, or the clear meaning commentary. Is a very good text from amongst the 21 different commentaries of from India. So in the beginning of this text by Haribhadra, so he has mentioned about the intelligent followers of the Buddha, who uses reasoning and logic and reason to find or to develop faith in the what are known as the 3 knowledges, which actually are the insights that bring about the Arya Sanghas. So I have been saying that the Buddhism will live for another few centuries if we follow in the pattern of the intelligent followers or disciples of the Buddha, using reason to prove the verity of the teaching of the Buddha. Whereas if we follow in the pattern of the less intelligent ones, or then we don't know how long this Buddhist tradition would remain. And therefore it is very important for us to follow the reason-based arguments. And therefore it is very important for us to be able to go side by side with, go in parallel with the science, modern science. So in the past we lived behind the Himalayas, just confined to our own land, our own monasteries and so forth. But after coming into exile, we have, in the past, it's like we were in a very small market where we could do some kind of a business. But today, after coming into exile, we have reached a larger, a greater, or bigger market, the whole world. And so even modern scientists and other scholars are taking interest in our Nalanda tradition. So therefore, it is like the exile has been a blessing in disguise for us. In the past, before 1959, the monks in Drepung, when they go to Lhasa market, then they would hear some kind of a news. Otherwise, they are in some kind of a secluded from the town and the city. So today we have reached on a world arena, and people have called our Buddhist tradition Lamaism. And this is because Tibetans traditionally didn't have much respect for the learned geshes, those who are qualified teachers, having studied the five canonical treatises and so forth. But Lamas are considered highly, or regarded very highly. And now, after coming into exile, we have been able to shine through our own tradition that we have kept, the Nalanda tradition that we have kept for over 1,000 years. And so the Tibetans inside Tibet are able to keep their hope alive because of being us in exile, being able to shine throughout the world through our tradition. So there have been people who have self-immolated inside Tibet, over 154. So they could sacrifice their own life, but they didn't indulge in non-violence, harming others. So, under such difficult situation inside Tibet, Tibetans inside Tibet have kept their spirit alive, and their spirit is very strong. And so we in exile, we are representing those Tibetans inside Tibet. And so far in our exile life, we have done our best. And so we should keep it up. So the Lamaism, the so-called Lamaism, which was seen as some kind of a silly religion, is no more today. What we have is this Nalanda tradition, which we can actually show off to the world. You whom the conqueror prophesied would reveal the meaning of the mother of Panchaparamita, and who, according to the pith instructions of the Lord Maitreya, clarified the great Panchaparamita text, the three mothers. To you, Acharya Haribhadra, I pray. You who completely integrated the intended meaning of Vinaya's 100,000 sections, supremely steadfast and learned one, who thoroughly and without mistake taught individual liberation according to the Sarvastivada tradition, Guna Prabha, at your feet I pray. So of course in the Theravada tradition we have, they have a very good practice of the Vinaya, the monastic code of discipline. So we also have the same practice regarding the monastic code of, there are the 4 defeats are same, 13 remainders also same. And in one of the precepts, in our tradition, Pali tradition, it is mentioned the lower garment should be, the skirt, like the garment should be worn properly, whereas in our Mulla Sarvastivada Vinaya tradition, there are 7 points mentioned, such as not keeping it too low so that it is below the ankle, not too high above the knee, and not too tight around your body, and not folding the upper flap too low, and so forth. And to wear the this lower garment, the skirt, in a cylindrical fashion. So these pertain to the general structure of the teaching of the Buddha. So on the basis of having gained understanding and knowledge of the general structure teaching of the Buddha, the Sutra, Jnana teachings, including Vinaya and so forth, then if we enter into Tantra, it would be very effective. The Tantra is meant, the specialized called teaching, tailored for specific disciples. So these terms, standard or the general structure of the teaching of the Buddha, or the general characteristics of the Buddha's teaching, and the specialized teachings are terms that were coined by Tibetan master Nyingwen Songtrapa. And then next is Shakyapprabha. And then the last of the 17 Nalanda masters is Master Atisha Dipankara Srijana, expounding the profound and the vast and all traditions of the sages' words as the paths for beings of 3 different capacities. Gracious Lord, who spread the Buddhist teachings in the land of snows, Jo Atisha, to you I pray. And then after that, these preeminent scholars, ornaments of this world, and sublime sources of the most wondrous lucid explanations, I pray in this way with clear and undivided faith. Bless me that my mind be matured and brought to liberation. And then how to bring about this liberation is understanding the meaning of the two truths, the fundamental nature of all. May I gain certitude as to how I entered the cycle of existence and how to end it through the 4 truths, sustained by valid reasoning. May my faith in the 3 refuges be stable. Bless me that I may plant the very root of the path to liberation. And with a renounced mind striving for liberation that stills all sufferings and compassion, that in its wish to protect all beings extend to the limits of all directions as its root. Bless me that I may train in unfabricated bodhicitta, and so forth. And His Holiness is reading the colophon of the text now. So commenting on the deep and vast tradition of Lord Buddha's sublime teaching, these mighty Indian scholars of the past composed a large number of extraordinary eloquent treatises which can open the eye of understanding for inquiring mind. In view of the fact that some 2,550 years later, these texts have endured without decline to the present day as subjects of steady contemplation and meditation, I wish to remember the great kindness of these mighty scholars and aspire to follow their example with undivided faith. So nowadays, at a time when all over the world progress in science and material technology has reached unparalleled heights, and people are greatly disturbed by the distractions of this life's busy preoccupations, it is extremely important that those of us who follow the Buddha should know and understand the Buddha's teaching and thus attain faith in them with unbiased intellectual honesty, starting with our doubts. we should search for reasons and finally examine and analyze them, seeing how indispensable in seeking the reasons that comprise the knowledge of to underpin faith are these highly accomplished treatises on the profound and the vast traditions. So highly accomplished treatises on the profound and vast traditions by the renowned 6 ornaments, 2 supreme ones, Buddha Palita, Arya Vimuktisena and others. I commissioned a new painting in which, as well as the existing tradition of depicting the 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones, 9 other figures from the profound and vast lineages were added, altogether comprising the 17 accomplished panditas of Nalanda. And at the same time, the wish arose in me to write a prayer like this, one expressing my heartfelt devotion towards these great learned masters, in which some enthusiastic Dharma friends also encouraged me. Thus, it was that I, the Buddhist monk Tenzin Gyatso, who among all the students of their writings sits in the bottom at the end row, but has developed unfabricated, confident faith in the treatise of these kings of all scholars, completed this prayer illuminating 3 faiths, a prayer to the 17 great panditas of glorious Nalanda in the 2545th year after the passing into bliss of the teacher of the tradition of the elders, according to the Tibetan calendar, on the first day of the 11th month of the Iron Snake year of the 17th Drepung cycle, and by the Western system, 15th December 2001 at Tekken in Dharamsala, situated in the Kangra district of the Indian province of Himachal. May it be meritorious. So the next text was written by Changkya Rinpoche. Kien tempa tinsi. Kien tempa tenzin. So Gentempa Tenzin, who was senior most Drepung scholar, so when I gave a teaching on this text, Gentempa Tenzin had also come, and he was so fascinated by this teaching that he wrote his own commentary. And so I received his transmission of his commentary on this text by so getting to know my old mother, my master, kindness without equal, reveals this with total clarity, the wonderful truth of profound dependence arising. May he remain forever within my heart. This is a prayer to the 7th Dalai Lama, His Holiness Gyaltsang Gyatso, who and Changkya Rinpoche himself was not someone who had studied in these big monastic institutions, but he studied mainly in China. I'll say a few spontaneous words of whatever arises within my mind. I, a mad and stupid son, was for so long without my mother. Now, by good fortune, it dawns upon me she was with me all along, and I did not recognize her. My brother, dependent arising, has taught this secret to me. So now I think isn't it? So the dependent arising is termed as the metaphor for dependent arising is used the brother, and the brother has dependent arising has helped him to gain insight into emptiness, which he termed for which he used the metaphor mother, the old mother. So because on dependence on dependent arising, insight into dependent arising, you are able to gain insight into emptiness. The inner and outer world in its variety is but a smile of mother. The changes of birth and death her lies. Undeceiving mother, you deceive me. My brother, dependent rising, will protect me. Ultimately, it is solely by the kindness of old mother that freedom will be won. For if the inner and outer were like this, even Buddhas of the past, present, and future would have no way to protect. These changes are expressions of forever unchanging mother. Freedom therefore exists, not existing as anything. So these changes are expressions. So things do not have any absolute existence, but they exist by way of dependence on other factors. And therefore, this unchanging mother, its expression are the changes, and freedom therefore exists, is possible, not existing as anything. My inexpressible mother, manifesting as whatever, mutual dependence, just this is something to realize. So this is similar to what the quantum physics says. So Master Nagarjuna says, whatever arises through dependence is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. There is no phenomena which is not dependent, therefore there is no phenomenon which is not empty. So the emphasis on teaching the dependent arising and persistently is because we have this notion of things as if they have some kind of independent absolute existence, and on the basis of that we develop an exaggerated outlook, and that in turn gives rise to the destructive emotions, and therefore to counter them we need to understand this dependent arising leading into this insight into emptiness. So Kunu Lama Rinpoche, from whom I received a commentary on transmission of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and he told me that in Sanskrit, whereas in the Sanskrit version, and so there's this verse which says the grasping at true existence is overcome by the wisdom of emptiness, and also it dissolves within emptiness. So when you use the instrumental term, it refers to the true path and the agent, the path overcoming these ignorance. And when it's expressed as the dissolving into the emptiness, it actually shows that of the true cessation. Searching for my old mother and not to find her old father, and not to find him is to find my old mother, and in her lap I find my old father. My kind-hearted parents protect dear son. So Tsongkhapa received instruction from his earliest teacher, Chögyig Döndrup Rinchen, to study the Madhyamaka texts. And then Tsongkhapa went to the central part of Tibet, and he studied the great treatises and sat for examination or amidst the many scholars. And then afterwards, Rinpoche sat in meditation, and at one time he had a vision of Manjushri. And Manjushri asked some questions, and Manjushri gave some instruction, and Tsongkhapa said he couldn't comprehend the meaning. And then Manjushri said, you should strive in accumulation of merit and purification of negativities. And so, at the instruction of Manjushri, Wisdom Buddha, Rinpoche went into solitude, living in a hermit life, and therefore he combined meditation, single-pointed concentration, and analytical meditation, where you do critical analysis into the teaching of the Buddha. And then one night he had a dream of Master Nagarjuna surrounded by his 5 disciples, and one of them was touched a hand at scripture, held in his hand the scripture which was touched on Tsongkhapa's head, and that was Buddha Palita. He touched Buddha Palita commentary which he wrote on Tsongkhapa's head. And then the next morning, Master Tsongkhapa read Buddha Palita commentary. He came to the point where he read about if the aggregates were the self, and then it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates. And so, based on this verse, he was able to gain a correct and unmistaken insight into emptiness. So, because of gaining this unique insight into the unique teaching of the reality of dependent arising, then he wrote, Master Tsongkhapa wrote his praise to the Buddha for teaching dependent arising. So gaining insight into this mere nominality of and dependent nature of things, then he wrote this text, Tendril Tepa. So this is a short text, the praise to the Buddha for teaching relativity or dependent origination. If you could memorize it and then recite it and ponder on the meaning, it would be helpful. Good. No one nor other, my mother's face seems to exist without being apprehended in the mirror of the brother dependent arising, and I, as stupid as I am, had never considered this. Number Sedira Nagarjuna Chandakiti. So within the Madhyamaka philosophical school, there are the subdivisions, the Savatantrika Madhyamakas and those of the Prasangika Madhyamakas. And so Savatantrika Madhyamakas said things do exist the way they appear to our sensory perception, and so there are lots of arguments and examination or investigation whether things appear to our sensory perception objectively or not. So in quantum physics, when they say that when you actually dissect a thing into its parts and smaller parts, subparts and so forth, there's nothing that you can pinpoint as being this or that. So not as one, not as called separate and so forth. When you actually consider put things under the lens of this kind of critical analysis and investigation, what you actually come to understand is that things are merely labeled, designated, and merely in name. So if things were to have any kind of absolute existence, then in the Madhyamaka Avatara, there are arguments that the Arya's insight would be actually destroyer of the conventional things, and so forth. There are 4 different points that are raised, criticisms that are raised. So Rinpoche says in his commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika, there are things could exist either one way or the other, either as dependent or having some kind of essential independent existence. And since the latter is not possible, therefore there's no other choice but to say things are merely designated, and therefore one should direct one's mind, steer one's mind towards that. That seems to be like a desperate statement. But when you actually check things critically, by default, what you find is that things are merely things exist by way of our labeling and name. So this point of the Arya beings insight as the destroyer of the things is true, because if things were to have any kind of independent absolute existence, this insight should be able to actually find that, because it is an insight which is developed by searching into how things exist, whether they exist by way of their own existence and nature or by way of some other factors, and therefore it should be able to find that. And since it does not find anything as having independent existence, therefore, when you see emptiness, I mean, it would also tantamount to, you would have to, it would be tantamount for you to say that things could be destroyed by this insight, and that is not the case. And then the conventionalities of things could also be absolute. These days, some bright minds are so attached to terminologies, self-sustaining, self-existence, and so on, ignore this animated appearance and search for another horned creature to refute. On the unveiled face of Mother, there is no trace of this animated appearance. Without penetrating this subtle point, you may explain and explain. But old Mother might flee elsewhere. That which exists, of course, exists, but this erect and upright contradiction does not appear as being existent, yet Mother and Father, inseparably in their harmony, are at least happy and at peace. Followers of the sutras, mine on his school, 3 scholars of the East, they ascribe the great white form of mother elephant to the striped tiger of matter with its painted smile, or to the brainless monkey of consciousness, or to the wild bear of non-dual self-sustaining existence. They tie her down with many a name, but they have lost old Mother. So the Savatantrika Madhyamakas who say that things exist by way of an objective existence from the side of the object, as well as in the perception of, through the perception of an unmistaken knowledge or valid cognition. So the Buddha himself has said that I have found this nectar-like teaching, which is profound, which is calm, and then unfabricated or unelaborated, and then so the profundity and the peaceful refer to the true cessation and true path. And then the unfabricated could be referred to the teaching of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, in which the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom sutras, which elaborates on the true cessation. And then luminous and the unconditioned could be referred to the third, could be taken as a reference to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the clear light mind is taught. Whereas in the second turning, in the perfection of wisdom teachings, the Buddha taught what we call object clear light, the emptiness, and this subjective clear light, which is the mind which realizes that emptiness, the subtle mind, is taught in the third turning of the wheel. And in fact, there is a sutra which is called Dagaishe, which means the wisdom at the time of death. So this is how I understand this verse to be referring to the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. So the profound and calm refer to the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and unelaborated or unfabricated refers to the second turning, and then the luminosity and unconditioned things refer to the third turning. So this second turning of the wheel of Dharma teaches that of the object clear light, which is emptiness, and then the third turning shows or teaches the subjective clear light mind, which is the mind that is used to recognize or to realize emptiness. And then in the highest Yoga Tantra, there are the 5 stages of the completion stage. So the Tathagata Garbha Sutra's ultimate subject matter is the subtlest clear light, which is called the isolation of mind. The example clear light of the completion stage. Many scholars of the and meditators of Sakya, Nyingmaka, Karmaka Gyu and Drupaka Gyu talk of self-knowing consciousness, of ungraspable clarity and emptiness. Of the primordially pure, spontaneous phase of Samandabhadra, of the uncreated, innate Mahamudra, of being free from asserting existence or non-existence, and so on. Proudly you proclaim your terminology, and as if it is on target good, but I wonder what you are pointing at. No need to be anxious. External phenomena are not destroyed. Be happy, you believers in external phenomena. There is no consciousness knowing itself, but valid cognition knows its object. So be happy, you followers of mind only. Phenomena do not exist by their own characteristics, yet there is this variety of dependent arising. Be happy, you, the 3 scholars of the East. It is all right to hold clarity and emptiness and as non-contradictory. This refers to the Sakya position. Seltong Zinme. So non-grasping or conception of clarity and emptiness. Put away your apprehension, upholders of the student's instruction lineage. All may be primordially pure, so the Nyingma tradition, but good and bad exist. Do not cling to purity, knowledge bearers. So these terminologies may sound contradictory, but from a point of view of someone experienced, these make sense. Meditate by creating anew, and the innate will still arise. No need to be so insistent, you old Togden meditators. It is all right to assert the non-elaborations of existence or non-existence. Do not fret, you hard-headed logicians. However, it is possible that this has come about because those not well-versed in scripture are not familiar with the terminology. I mean no disrespect to you. Forgive me if I have offended you. I am not young knowing it all. Not a young knowing it all, but I ride the noble stallion of my ancestors' lineage. With diligence and perseverance, I will become skilled in writing and be delivered from this frightening precipice path. No need to search for it in the searcher himself. Do not cling to things as real, for they are false, but do not destroy the false, for it is truth itself. Be content in not existing and not non-existing. I have not seen my mother, but by just their names, it is as if my kind and long-lost parents are here standing before me. Nagarjuna and his followers, so kind, Losan Drakpa, so kind, my kind Lama, so kind. In return, I perform the puja of mother. I pray that my unborn, inexpressible old mother comes together with her little child of mind, and with a great festival of bodhisattva deeds leads all beings to everlasting happiness. Yes, Rölpé Dorjé, dances for joy. Yes, in this very place, puja for the great jewel, three jewels. This untrue echo of a song entitled Recognizing My Mother was composed by Changkya Dorjé, someone with great faith in the Madhyamaka at the second place, known as the Five-Peak Mountain. Mutation, the scribe was the monk Gelek Namka. Translated into English by Gavin Kilty, 1998. So the teaching is done now.
I have something forgotten to say before. So here there are a lot of monks came from Mongolia. So please raise hand, those who came from Mongolia, the Mongolian monks and nuns. So there are a large community of Mongolian monks here at Gomang Monastery who are studying here. So for many years, Gomang Monastery has a special relation with the monks coming from Mongolia. When I was in Lhasa, there are many geshes from Mongolia. I think over 100. And there are quite many of them also in Sergei, but I think most of them are from Mongolia. And at the time of the 1959 protest, and the former abbot Seching is also from Mongolia. So in 1959, there's also Geshe, there are a few of them, and so as the Lord Buddha himself has stated very clearly in the sutra that my teachings will spread from north to north, and from India to Tibet, and from Tibet to the north part, which is Mongolia. So this is a saying that we have, and as we do have a saying, so the outer Mongolia and also the inner Mongolia, and also those who are under the Russia, the Kalmyk, Buryat, and all the other followers of Buddhism who are residing in these countries. And if you look at the history of Tibet from Drongpan Chogyam Phangpa, at time also the Buddhism came from Tibet to these Mongolian regions, and also the third Dalai Lama, Gyoswana Migyatso, At the time of that, Dalai Lama Sonam Gyatso also, the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism went from Tibet to these Mongolian regions. And a lot of scholars have produced from these regions. And in 1917 to 18, I think, at the time of revolution in Mongolia, hundreds of monks were killed. But after that, after they gained independence, especially in the practice of their religion, and it has improved a great deal. And if you even look at the different regions in these states, there are many new monasteries coming up and new institutions coming up, which is really great. And I've been always telling them that you all have to study the Buddhism, and it is so important to come here and to study. And the abbot is also here. I always tell him that it is so important. And the followers, everyone has to study. And it's not just about the Mongolian monks and the nuns, but all those who follows the Nalanda traditions, who has some connection with Tibetan Buddhism, has to really study the Buddhism. And the Sanskrit traditions, especially the Mahayana traditions, which went from, which spread over to countries such as Japan, Korea, and India and Tibet, and in Tibet in the 7th century, and later to the 8th, 9th century through the Chiche Tison Devzen and Shandarakshita and so on. So the study of the epistemology, the logic texts, has really spread in Tibet. So generally, the study of the logics and also the debate in the style of Tibetan Buddhism. Of course, this is introduced largely by Chaba Chösing, and this the special technique of debate in Tibetan Buddhism has its origin coming from Chaba Chösing, and this is really something very beneficial and extremely a great way to study. And this has to implement in most of the education institutions in terms of studying Buddhism in the eastern part of the world. And as we all are common in terms of reciting the Heart Sutra, I always urge all of you that it is so important that we have to study. And when I go to the parts of Japan over the years, I used to tell them. And when I went to a temple in Japan a few years ago, in one of the temples in Japan, there is a ceremony, and I told them at that time that, so this temple, this wonderful temple that you have, has to be a center for studying Buddhism and engage in different dialogues. And the abbot agreed at that time, and I don't know what happened after that, but that is a request that I made to the abbot. And I have a friend, an abbot from Japan. He's a close friend of mine, and I used to tell him frankly that, of course, the monasteries in Japan are not need to mention, but even the lay people in Japan, they recite the Heart Sutra. Though they do the recitation, but they don't understand the meaning of the Heart Sutra. And when I did some explanation of the Heart Sutra, the abbot told me that it's really beneficial and helps them a lot way to understand the sutra. So these places, especially where the Sanskrit tradition has prevailed, from China to Korea and Japan and Tibet and Mongolia, where we all study the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra and we all recite Heart Sutra. So it is so important that we have to study Buddhism. And the teachings of Lord Buddha is something we have to study and gain the wisdoms through listening and reading, and then contemplation and finally the meditative wisdoms. And this is the essence of the the Buddhism, and this is something all of us who are the followers of Lord Buddha has to do. And you all are really working very hard, and in Taiwan also, in the centers, you are in some of the centers in Taiwan, Tenzin Changyup Center especially, do debate in Tibetan style, and it's really praiseworthy. And so gradually all the other centers have to also do the studies in Buddhism. And even in Lhasa at that time, we do have some issues from China who are really great scholars. And so today we have a large gathering here from Mongolia and other regions. So I once again wanted to urge you to study. And at the time of the ceremony here, I'll sit on the throne, and then you have to pay respect to me. But when I study, when I was young, I study as a common monk. I do the memorization of the roots and read the commentaries. I took tuitions and classes from my tutor, Ling Rinpoche, and so on, and also debate as a common monk to study in these great institutions. So therefore, the way of studying is common for all of us. It is so important. And also those of you who have the name of reincarnated lamas and tulkus, you too have to follow the same and study. So in 21st century, we have to, if we really work hard, and as I stated before, we can be the follower of a Buddha who actually belongs to the higher intelligent level, who understand through our wisdom, who understand the teachings, and then gain faith to the Lord Buddha. And that will be a step towards preservation of Lord Buddha's teaching in the world, and especially not generally the Buddhism, and also particularly through the studies of epistemology and the logics, through the texts of Dignaga and Dhammakriti. And this is something that we can contribute to the whole world. And I hope that this style of study, especially based on the logics coming from Dignaga and Chandakriti, may become a trend all over the world. So you all came here and working very hard with so many difficulties. So the main essence that you have to take from here is to study the Buddhisms and the great texts. So those of you from Mongolia, you came here, of course you have a very well-built body, but